Why I am never enough. Now one could also say this might be partially an explanation for why others also might never be enough and why also this feeling occurs constantly. Now this is not necessarily an explanation, it's an attempt of an explanation, at least to my own future self. Now, once I am enough, what do I do then? Nothing. So the question is, what is the feeling? And maybe also the description of the feeling then in words, like why am I not enough or I am not enough, that leads actually to the best behavior. One could say that if one has reached an absolute state, then one needs to further drive forward in order to keep the rate of change constant. Now one could also say that the first derivative, aka the rate of change, ideally would also increase over time, so the second derivative of this function would also be positive. So first of all, we keep a constant rate of change, but we also increase the rate of change. So in terms of how fast I am learning, one could say that I am not learning at a constant speed as I go through life, so basically with any proportion of 1 to time, but I'm actually, as time goes on, becoming more effective at learning, and so therefore I'm also increasing basically the second derivative. I am not increasing the second derivative, I am increasing the first derivative, but the second one is then positive because, well, there is an increase in the first derivative. Now, one could also make multiple derivatives, but basically further ones. One could now interpret this question of why am I not enough is, why am I not enough at this absolute state? Now, if we define this absolute state, for example, in one metric, as in the net worth I have now, then one also has to factor in maybe that the value of whatever one has now is kind of depreciating over time, at least with the current political decision, mostly one could say, is that inflation is allowed to occur. So therefore, this is also degrading. So in order to hold wealth and also net worth, for example, at a certain level, one would basically have to have at least a rate of change that is outweighing this, basically, and resulting in an, over time, kind of absolutely constant, but then in this case no longer absolutely constant, because it would have the value of whatever net worth one, so the unit of value would need to be slightly increasing as the value of the currency is decreasing. Now, this would be one thing where one could say, okay, then this is constant, to keep a constant net worth. But then one could also say that it is at least the first derivative that is feeling not enough. So one could need or feel the need to have a constant rate of change. Now this constant rate of change could be that one is increasing. Let's just say, okay, there is something that is easily measurable, but also serves as a comparably simple analogy, which would be that one lifts a certain amount of weight, and one has a body that is able to lift a certain amount of weight. The absolute thing here would that the weight basically, and here we again have a similarity with inflation going on. Now, the first thing not being enough would be that one has an absolute level of, okay, I can lift 100 kilogram in bench press. It's not lifting, but let's just say deadlift. Okay, I deadlift 100 kilograms. Now, the first derivative would be that there is a rate of change. So over time, one is able to keep a constant rate of progress. So I'm increasing my deadlift by 1% every month, let's just say. This would be constant. And then also one could have the question, why am I never enough? So basically the question then, the resulting vector out of this optimization question, the resulting optimization vector would be that one wants to increase the rate of change. And this is the reason why one is not feeling enough. The second derivative then would be now analogous to, it would not be analogous, it would just be the second derivative. So basically, in addition to increasing by 1% every month, one would also every year increase the rate of change for every month. Let's just say in the first year, one increases 1%, 1%, 1%. Of course, now the interval of the year for basically the additional, it would then be a step function if we would have a yearly change. Maybe it would more be marginally. So one could say one multiplies basically the rate of change with a factor, and this factor would then be bigger than 1. So therefore, the rate of change over a month, let's just say over the period of a month, also the step function of a month, then one could also kind of go into infinitely marginally to basically slicing it further down and not just have a step function, but actually making a continuous function by basically having this marginal increase in deadlift. But of course, now the deadlift is measured only once one works out and actually lifts weight, so we have a certain fixed sample rate, so therefore there is a step function anyway. Now, the second derivative would be that one says 1 is not enough if one even keeps kind of if even one has an increasing rate of change for the weight. And so the feeling of not being enough might be present because it reflects basically this problem. It doesn't reflect this problem. I am not enough is basically what is the resulting conclusion out of this? I need to adapt, and as one stops to adapt and the environment changes, then obviously one is probably, it's not obvious, but it seems to be the case that then over time one is less adapted to the environment or to a given metric. And in terms of the inflation, in terms of deadlift, one could also say that age kind of inflates this. One, in order to counterfact this, one could basically say at a certain age, I deadlift X amount of what is supposed to be a certain standard for this certain age.